First and foremost, I want to say thank you for the support. I appreciate everyone who took the time to watch my video and left great feedback. I'm still trying to get the writing and editing workflow down, so please bear with me. So in my last video, I talked about some of the executive orders Trump signed in his first week of resuming his presidency. I thought that would be the end of it, and most of the news cycle would focus on something else. Oh, how wrong I was. It's been almost nothing but Trump news, which I'm sure he loves. Instead of talking about Trump's comments regarding Gaza,
the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it.
Or his push to abolish the Department of Education, or many other topics, I want to focus on one for this video.
Tariffs.
And remember again the word tariff, Tariff King.
Tariffs is probably Trump's favorite word after
China.
It's been the hallmark of his return to office and the amount of people I've had to educate around me on what a tariff is, how they work, and when they're used. It's way too damn high. I think for a lot of people, they assume that a tariff is a tax a country pays when trading a good or service in said country. And while that is true, there's a bit more thought that needs to be had to understand the consequences. Tariffs are a tax to embolden a country's owned industry, making it more difficult for outside competitors to compete domestically. If a country wants to develop their own automotive industry, for example, they would impose a tariff to make any vehicles produced outside of the country much more expensive for customers, giving the domestic companies a better chance at beating the competition abroad on price. National security can also be a reason for a tariff to be imposed. If a country becomes too reliant on other countries for energy production, it could use a tariff to encourage domestic companies to invest in energy production. This would make the country much more self-sufficient in maintaining or guaranteeing a certain quality of life for its citizens, which is incredibly important. And lastly, a tariff can be used in developing countries when there are other forms of taxation may be less effective at generating revenue. In desperation, the country would rely on outside sources for additional income in order to facilitate a young but growing economy. I bet most of you can't name this country, by the way. Prove me wrong. Those are the only legitimate cases I can see for a tariff to be used that can be argued for the good of the people. Now, when shouldn't you impose tariffs? Well, how about right now? We always hear about how America used to be a manufacturing production powerhouse, how built in America was a sign of quality and craftsmanship, or how America led the pack in every industry. Well, it's much easier to be all those things when the entire world is rebuilding after World War II. Even our allies were busy rebuilding while the US mainland remained relatively untouched. Russia, our other big ally during World War II, lost millions of people in the war and had already suffered millions dying from their own civil war, which happened near the end of the First World War, in which they also lost millions. Russia was a superpower nonetheless, but not to the extent of the United States. There's a reason Americans used to be able to support their family, buy a home, and retire on one person's salary. We had it very good. But those days weren't going to last, and were just a byproduct of our incredibly fortunate position on the global stage at the time. And I know what you're gonna say, but we're still the biggest economy. USA. Yeah, we are, but the gap isn't as big as it once was. Our factories moved abroad because companies wanted to make even more money and not pay the livable wages that so many Americans relied on. Investment into government programs to enrich our future generations dwindled. Our education system focused more on raising costs than actually teaching, and our technological advantages were outpaced. All these factors shrank the thriving middle class in America, the biggest indicator of a healthy, growing economy and stable, peaceful society. And guess what? Tariffs aren't going to save you. Hell, they might sink you even more. Tariffs lead to increased costs of goods. It's quite simple. If something costs more to sell, then the seller will increase its price, effectively passing the cost of business to the consumer. If it costs $5 for domestic eggs, and imported eggs cost $10, most people are going to buy the domestic product. But what if there isn't a domestic version? Well, then you're going to have to buy the imported product, and the cost of doing business in your country is going to be passed on to you. And it's not just finished products. If a local company requires a material that can only be sourced cheaply and reliably abroad, they will have to pay more money for it and will increase their own prices to compensate their costs. Another thing a lot of Trump supporters don't understand is that these costs will have a bigger impact on their quality of life than on the rich. A rich person probably doesn't even look at the price tag of items when they shop. But for a regular person on a budget, decisions will have to be made. Things that were once a staple might become a treat, and things that were a luxury are now a dream. But we'll just make our own products, built in America for Americans. I'm sure you've heard Republicans say this verbatim. Then why did almost every company move their manufacturing offshore? Why are they squashing unions? Why hasn't the minimum wage followed inflation? Why has executive level compensation skyrocketed? If these companies cared so much, they wouldn't have moved their plants abroad to pay peanuts for labor, they wouldn't have reduced quality for the sake of quantity, and they wouldn't have used those profits to line their coffers instead of investing into their employees and their country. I'll finish with this. Trump signed the USMCA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which was heralded as NAFTA 2.0. Trump then criticizes the people who made the trade deal, which was himself. Trump was the one who made the deal, yet his supporters don't seem to bring that up. We're setting ourselves up for a trade war with our neighbors and allies, as well as incredibly important trade partners. Our bloc alone accounts for almost a third of the entire GDP of the world. And instead of trying to strengthen our ties with our allies, Trump is trying to strong-arm them while using the American public as collateral. The uncertainty of the future has sent shockwaves throughout the market, and people are already beginning to panic. I hope that most of this is just Trump posturing and overloading the media with executive orders and exaggeration to feign real power, but if Trump keeps his promises and his executive orders do not get shut down, we're going to be in for a wild ride these next 4 years. Thanks again everyone for watching, and if you made it to the end of this video, consider liking and subscribing. I appreciate the support. Rant over.